On a warm July evening in 2018, a 20-year-old jogged out of a small Iowa town. She never came back. 5 weeks later, the thing that found her wasn't a search dog, or a psychic, or a tip. It was a neighbor's security camera. Mollie Tibbetts was 20, a psychology student, home for the summer. That evening, she was dog-sitting at her boyfriend's house in Brooklyn, Iowa, and went out for a run she had taken 100 times. Morning came without her. She had missed work, and Mollie never missed work. By nightfall, a town of 1,400 was searching in the dark. Her boyfriend, Dalton Jack, was 2 hours away on a job site. 3 things would decide this case: where she went, who was watching, and a car nobody noticed. There were no calls, no messages. For a young woman who lived online, the silence was deafening. And then the searches began. Brooklyn is a town of barely 1,400 people. Runners there use the same few roads, past farmhouses and open fields. Mollie's loop carried her toward the edge of town. Somewhere out there, on familiar ground, she simply vanished. Bloodhounds worked the ditches. Divers checked the ponds. Helicopters swept the fields. Nothing. No torn clothing, no blood, no sign she had ever been on that road at all. A missing person report became a national search. Over 1,000 tips, a reward climbing past $300,000. And still, 5 weeks of nothing. Until investigators stopped searching fields and started knocking on doors, asking one question: did your cameras see her? The hunt for Mollie Tibbetts grew into one of the largest searches in Iowa history. The FBI joined the state's Division of Criminal Investigation. Volunteers walked corn rows for miles. Farmers opened their bins, their barns, their fields. The reward swelled as strangers donated from across the country. Businesses, farmers, ordinary families. Within weeks, it passed $370,000, one of the largest in the state's history. And still, not a single confirmed sighting. Detectives did what detectives do first. They looked hard at the people closest to Mollie. Her boyfriend Dalton was working out of town, his alibi confirmed by co-workers and his own phone. One by one, the obvious leads were cleared. Mollie's father, Rob, flew back from California and stood before the cameras. He pleaded for her return. The town of Brooklyn tied ribbons to every post. Vigils filled the church. But hope was thinning with each passing day. With every lead exhausted, the case began to cool. No crime scene, no weapon, no body. Investigators had a route and a timeline, but nothing to connect them. By mid-August, some feared Mollie would never be found. Search crews focused on the endless corn around Brooklyn. The stalks stood taller than a man. A body could lie yards from a road and never be seen. Thousands of acres. It was, in the end, exactly where they should have looked. Then detectives changed the entire approach. They began collecting every scrap of video along Mollie's route. Doorbells, business cameras. And one home, right on her jogging path, had a camera pointed straight at the road. What that camera had recorded was easy to miss. A jogger, a car, a few grainy seconds. But played back, frame by frame, those seconds would unravel 5 weeks of silence and lead detectives to a black Chevy Malibu. The house sat on the edge of Brooklyn, along the road Mollie ran. Its owner had a surveillance system aimed at the street. For weeks, no one had thought to ask. The footage covered the exact evening Mollie disappeared. There she was. Mollie, running past the camera in the fading light, right on schedule. Then, 28 seconds later, a vehicle. A dark, older sedan, moving along the same stretch of road. Then it came back, and it came back again. The car changed direction near where Mollie was running, back and forth. To investigators watching the playback, it no longer looked random. It looked like something was following her. They now had one goal: identify that car. Enhanced and studied, the vehicle was identified as a black Chevrolet Malibu. Investigators tracked it to a nearby dairy operation, Yarrabee Farms. The car belonged to a farmhand who lived just outside town. In the span of about 20 minutes, the Malibu slid through that same frame 6 times, circling, returning, always along Mollie's route. The machine had built a map no witness ever could. His name was Cristhian Bahena Rivera. 24 years old, he had worked at the dairy for years. When detectives showed him the footage, the story he told didn't match the timeline. So on the night of August 20th, they brought him in. That grainy clip, Mollie, then the Malibu, became the spine of the case. Later, it would play in open court as a public exhibit. A neighbor's camera, filming an empty road, had done what 1,000 searchers could not. But footage of a car is not a confession. Investigators still had no body, no weapon, no admission. Everything now depended on the next 11 hours and the agent who would sit across the table from him. Officer Pamela Romero of the Iowa City Police led the questioning. She spoke Spanish, so Rivera could be interviewed in his own language. The interview began late and stretched on. By the end, it had run roughly 11 hours. At first, Rivera denied everything. He said he didn't know Mollie, hadn't seen her, knew nothing. But the footage, the car, the times, they boxed him in. Hour after hour, his story began to shift. Romero later testified about that long night in detail. The pauses, the shifting answers, the moment his denials cracked. Defense lawyers would argue the interview ran too long, too leading. But investigators insisted every word came from him. Eventually, according to the criminal complaint, Rivera admitted he had seen Mollie running. He said he pulled over, got out, and ran alongside her. She told him to leave her alone. Then, he said, she reached for her phone. By his account, Mollie warned she would call the police. Then, Rivera claimed, he panicked and his memory went blank. He described a gap, a blackout. The next thing he remembered, he said, was driving, with blood in his car. He told them what he found in the trunk: a woman, bleeding. Then Rivera did the one thing no camera could force. He offered to show them where he had left her. He led investigators to a cornfield. On August 21st, they found Mollie. Her body lay hidden under corn leaves, dragged from the road into the field. The medical examiner determined she had died from multiple sharp force injuries. She had been there the whole time. Cristhian Bahena Rivera was charged with first-degree murder. The confession, the camera, the body, it looked airtight. But nearly 3 years later, inside a courtroom, that 11-hour night would be attacked from every angle. And Rivera would tell a completely different story. In May 2021, Cristhian Bahena Rivera went on trial. The venue had been moved over 100 miles to Davenport to seat an impartial jury. Judge Joel Yates presided. Much of it was filmed, gavel to gavel. The prosecution's case was built on physical proof. The camera footage placed his Malibu on Mollie's route, and inside the trunk of that car, forensic testing found Mollie's blood. The machine and the science told the same story. Agent Romero returned to the stand and walked jurors through the interrogation. Prosecutors played the footage of the Malibu again and again. Each pass tightened the same knot. The defense had to break that chain or lose. Then the defense put Rivera on the stand. Through an interpreter, he recanted the confession entirely. He now claimed 2 men, armed, their faces covered, had forced their way into his home. They made him drive, he said. They killed Mollie. Prosecutors called the masked men account a fabrication. There were no masks in any statement he had given for 3 years. No second car, no sign of intruders at his home. It had surfaced only now on the stand. It was the defense's last, desperate gamble. Everything now rested on a story no one had heard until that week on the stand. It was thin, and it was late. But for a moment, the whole case seemed to wobble. But the story had nothing behind it. No intruders, no second car, no trace of anyone but Rivera. Against his word stood the camera, the route, and the blood in the trunk. The physical proof still stood, so it came down to what the jury believed: a recanted confession, or a camera and a trunk full of blood. A ghost story of masked men, or 5 weeks of silence finally explained. On May 28th, they returned with an answer. The jury deliberated for about 7 hours. 7 hours to weigh 3 years of investigation. The camera, the confession, the blood, against a story told for the first time from the witness stand. Then word came, they had a verdict. Mollie's family sat in the gallery, as they had for 2 weeks. Every day they had watched the footage of their daughter, alive, running, and the man accused of taking her feet away. On May 28, 2021, the foreman read it aloud. Guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder. After nearly 3 years, the case that a home camera had cracked open was closed. One last twist came before sentencing. Jailhouse informants who pointed to other men. But their story didn't fit how Mollie was found, and the judge threw it out. On August 30th, 2021, Rivera received the only sentence the law allowed: life without parole. His appeals failed, and the conviction stood. For Mollie's family, the verdict brought answers, not peace. Her father had asked the public not to twist her death into hatred. Mollie, he said, would have wanted kindness. That was the daughter they lost. Mollie Tibbetts was 20 years old, weeks from her sophomore year. Her family created a foundation and a memorial run in her name. It was a camera no one had thought to check, and a car no one noticed, that ended the silence. Detectives had walked thousands of acres and found nothing. In the end, the break came from a machine bolted to a stranger's house, quietly filming an empty road. Where she went, who was watching? A car nobody noticed answered all of it. Mollie Tibbetts might never have been found without a neighbor's forgotten camera. It turned a jogger and a passing car into a chain no story could break. Did the footage decide the case, or the 11-hour night? Tell me what struck you most down in the comments.